Drink it in, drink it in, drink it in, man.
It is picked off by the line. Darius Slay's got it. Coming back right side 25. Picks up a block at the 30. Darius at the 40.
Drink it in, drink it in. Drink it in, drink it in, drink it in, man.
Rolls to the right. Stafford throws deep. Got a man out there. End zone. Caught. Touchdown, Detroit Lions. Marvin Jones.
Stafford! Drink it in, drink it in.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions. Cornbread.
Stafford! Drink it in, drink it in, drink it in, man.
Detroit Koolaid, what is going on, everybody? We are back, and I'm back. I'm back solo. It's your boy Oakrey. Kind of middle of the day on Friday. I felt like I wanted to break out a podcast, talk more about Hockenson. Last night, we kind of had like our initial reactions. Me, the Big Hughes, Grifka. You know, we knew where Grifka was going to sit on this pick. You know, Hughes kind of in the middle there, and me doing what I do, which is he wasn't my favorite. I would have taken somebody else, but now that he's a Detroit Lion, you think about it, you read up on it, you kind of see the fit, you begin to really support the pick and hope that he absolutely is an incredible football player for the Lions. So what I thought we'd do on this podcast is talk all about TJ Hockenson, kind of do a deep dive on all the different things that go with it, and also talk about some other things here leading into rounds 2 and 3 on a solo show. So right off the top here, I mean, I want to just say that there's just so many layers to this pick. I mean, when you take a tight end at that spot, you know, there's people that will just look at it and say tight end and hate it. There's people that will, you know, justify it to the hills because tight ends are important now in the NFL, and you know, they change the game. You know, they'll make him sound like the greatest player of all time. You know, I don't think it's either one of those. I definitely lean more towards the positive instead of, oh, it's tight end, it's terrible. You don't take tight ends in the top 10. Well, yeah, you didn't in the 70s, 80s, early 90s when they were big bruising blockers that didn't do anything else. Yeah, the value wasn't there. Now in 2019, more than 20 years later, they can catch, they can block, they can stretch the defense, they can make your offense versatile, do all types of things. So we'll talk all about that in a minute. But the other thing I want to get off my chest at the top is every time there's a first-round pick, good, bad, or otherwise, people act like that's the end-all, be-all. The first round's important. The top 10 is super important. There's no doubt. But there's 6 more rounds. And as I always try to tell Grifka, the top 3, 4, and even in the 5th round, nowadays NFL, with how good college football is, how many juniors are coming out, you're expected to get good players. So before people go crazy one way or the other, there's 6 more rounds to go, rounds 2 and 3 later tonight, which to me are the most important in every draft pretty much. It's where you get your quality, it's where you get first round talents. Later, it's where you complement your first-round pick with 2 other players that really fills out those first 3 guys that are going to help your roster. So you got to remember that. The Lions have 8 more draft picks. 8. Last year, I think they had 6 total. They have 8 more in the last 2 days. So they're definitely going to supplement this pick. They're definitely going to fill other needs. You just got to sort of be patient, figure out, okay, now that the tight end is taken care of, you know, what do we attack next? What's the next big need? What's the next thing that can help that on the offensive, defensive side of the ball, wherever Matt, Pat, and Bob Quinn want to go. So I just want to say that let's see this draft play out, and let's also know that it wasn't a one-pick draft by any means. The other thing I want to say is that it is a new age NFL. You know, I hit that just a moment ago of the people that turn the clock back and say, well, the last 20 tight ends in the first round, only X amount were good, or hey, you know, over a 40-year span, there's only been, you know, 5 top whatever tight ends. To me, I mean, that historical data isn't really valid because this definitely was not a pass-catching position for years and years ago. Definitely not 40 years ago. Definitely not 30, even 20 years ago. Only within the last, 8, 10, 12 years, if you want to stretch it, did it start becoming more of a pass-catching, impact weapon type position. So let's take that into consideration. And the other thing right here off the top is that had the Lions stuck at 8 and took a guy like Noah Fant, which I feel is much more of an Ebron part 2, a much more of just of a pass catcher, finesse guy, a guy that, he does one, excuse me, he does some things really well, catching, athleticism, speed, but he's not going to help you in the run game. He's not going to help your offensive line. He's not as sure-handed, all that type of stuff. Had they done that, I'd be much more furious today. But when you go out and you take a guy, as I've said on the previous show, meat and potatoes, doesn't drop the football, likes to block, good head on his shoulders, can digest all types of the playbook, seems to fit this team, I think that's, why I'm much more accepting of this pick, because of the type of tight end it was, and because of the type of team the Lions have now and the type of team they're trying to build. Had we had the flash and dash of 5-10 years ago, and then we add a meat and potatoes tight end that does a whole bunch of things, it wouldn't have made much sense. Wouldn't have fit the current team that they had, where they were trying to build like a high-flying offense with receivers and, always swinging and missing on running backs and bad quarterbacks, all that. We kind of have a lot of the other areas filled, and we want to both turn the clock back with a fullback that likes to crush people and a tight end that can crush people, but he can run by you. You can gadget player him because of the type of things he does. You can run him up the seam and he's going to get by people and catch it, and he's got a ton of yak yards, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So I want to get a few topics right off the top that you can kind of sink your teeth into. Let's go ahead and take a quick break from our sponsor, and I'll be right back. We'll really dive into who TJ Hockenson is, some of his things that maybe were mentioned, but maybe you missed in the coverage, and talk about him a lot more, as well as, hey man, head into rounds 2 and 3, what the heck are we going to do? What are we going to do as Lions fans, Detroit Koolaid drinkers, all that type of stuff. So let's take a quick break, hear from our sponsor. Be right back in one moment. Alright everybody, we're back. Talked about some stuff off the top, just sort of set up some things. Now let's talk about TJ Hockenson, number 8 pick, tight end, from the Iowa Hawkeyes. I know it was said on the broadcast, and they even showed a highlight. This guy was kind of a 2-time, I believe it was all-state basketball player at the forward position. I mean, when you play forward in basketball, anybody that knows anything about hoops, like, the forward is a guy that's got to be able to bang, he's got to be able to get up and down the floor, he's got to have good feet, he's got to be able to move. That's what I was trying to tell Grifka last night. He's got to be able to move fluidly, and that's really important at the tight end position, and that's something I think TJ Hockenson does really well. He's a smooth mover, and he can also lower the boom on you when he wants to, which some tight ends do not want to do. Now let's break down his size. I got him at about 6'5", 245, 250, and it says they ran a 4.7. We had the argument with Grifka. He's not as big as Gronk. He's not as fast, whatever. The numbers I pulled on Gronk went 6'6", 265, so 15 pounds heavier. And Gronk ran a 4.68, so basically the same 40. But he is doing it 15 to 20 pounds heavier. Travis Kelce, who I pulled up, was 6'5", 260 pounds, so basically exactly the same, maybe a little bit heavier. And he ran a 4.67. And to me, Kelce, Hockenson, they have similar type movement where, they're smooth, but they're not these freaky athletes that just jump off the page with height, weight, speed, or just kind of crazy numbers. They're just good, fluid movers when it comes to playing the game of football. Who's the hotness now in the NFL? George Kittle, 6'4", 247, so a little bit lighter, right around that Hockenson weight, a little bit shorter. And he ran a 4.54. That's quite a bit faster than a 4.7. But they played in the same program, have similar type attributes. And to me, Kittle was all about how they used him. They didn't have any receivers, anything else. They really milked this guy, got him the football, and when he caught it, he knew what to do with it. He got going, got after it after the fact. So, I think Hockenson can be that type of player. I don't know that he'll be utilized like that in Detroit, where he's just fed the football and he's the number one option, but I think you're going to see similar traits. Excuse me. So I wanted to bring up, just that overall height, weight, as well as speed, and say, man, some of the top guys in the league are comparable. And now the counterpoint will be, well, yeah, Gronk was a second rounder. Kelsey, I want to say, went in the third, I believe. George Kittle went after Big Mike Roberts. Lions took him over George Kittle. George Kittle was a guy I loved, but nobody expected him to be what he did this past year. Now, can he keep it up? Will be part of it as well. But, I think it just comes down to these guys are similar. Yes, they were taken later, but you redraft, you look at them as talents. They're top talents, which if you get a top talent at 8, 15, or in the third round, they're all valuable. Now, we love getting Kenny Galladay in the third. Now he looks like he may be number one. Yeah, that helps your team, no doubt, based on salary, draft value, all types of things. But, if you hit on a top 8, regardless of position, that's going to help your team as well. And to me, the biggest argument is that this guy was not going to be there had you passed him by. You weren't going to pass him by, get him later. You weren't going to pass him by and get a guy in the second or third round. Hey, this guy's just as good. This guy's very similar. No, this was really the only guy in this draft, and he's really one of the few guys in the last few drafts that's been, this type of tight end on both sides of the ball from a good program. A guy that will fit this team perfectly from a personality perspective. I mean, one of the things I had written down is that, excuse me, not only does he fit our current team needs, I think he's going to just be an absolute great match with Stafford. They seem to have that kind of low-key personality, but they love football. I think he's going to get along in the locker room great. He's going to want to prove himself from day one. When is the last time the Lions have had a blue-collar tight end? I'm talking a guy that loves to mix it up in the run game, a guy that can stretch the field, catch the ball, consistently catch the ball, and that, from Iowa, I don't have here exactly where he was born, but I assume he's kind of from that type of area where he's not trying to be the glitz and glamour, Eric Ebron. He's not trying to, be kind of a clumsy, butter sticks type tight end like Pettigrew ended up being. They felt Pettigrew was going to be this type of player, but he ended up not being that. I think he's got some special traits, and he's just very, very consistent across the board. So I think that's definitely something to think about. Now, let's talk about Bob Quinn. What does Bob Quinn do in the draft? Everybody wants to say he should took this guy, should took that. You look at his draft history, he's got one early miss, and that's Tease Tabor. He's filled holes every year. He's got players that have been really good character guys. He's got guys that produce. People can nitpick Jared Davis all day long. People can say, I don't know if Taylor Decker's that good. Is Taylor Decker starting basically every snap at left tackle? Yes. Did Jared Davis start from day one in the middle? Absolutely. So what Bob Quinn does is he fills holes, man. He goes out and says, all right, who do I need based on where my team is at right now? So what do you think he did in free agency? He said, we didn't really get after the passer consistently. Yeah, our sack numbers were okay, but we don't have that beast on the edge. So he goes and gets Trey Flowers, fills that hole. He and everybody else looks at our corners and go, we can't cover anybody in the slot. Not only do they catch it all day, they're scoring touchdowns, they're making big plays from the slot. Anybody that's guarded by Nevin Lawson, Tease, whoever else we had in there last year at that position, goes out and get Justin Coleman, one of the top-rated slot interior corners. He fills the need with Jesse James, another both sides of the football type tight end, high upside, 24, 25 years old. That covers him in case he did want to pass on TJ Hockenson, and now he's made what's a weakness a strength. He didn't even bring up Big Mike Roberts in his press conference yesterday, which I think says a lot. He just said we got two good tight ends now. So I don't know what that says for Big Mike, either making the roster or having some role on this team. But we went from no production last year to, now 2 guys that I think can fit this offense, do what they want them to do, and be physical. Like Kyle Brandt on Good Morning Football said, when have the Lions ever been smash mouths? When have they ever been in your face, run the football type of football team? Never. Never in my lifetime. We've always wanted to sling it around. We've always wanted the flashy guy that will sell jerseys. Now with Bob Quinn, Matt Patricia, and this program now in its like 3rd or 4th year under his regime, I feel like there's a team now that can be gritty and grimy, can be a good defense, can be a smash mouth run game with a quarterback that can still throw the football any type of way you want to throw it. So not too many times you see teams that kind of have all 3 of those working, and when you do, they usually win at a pretty high level. So Bob Quinn, man, he fills holes. He looks at weaknesses. He takes care of them right away. He doesn't mess around. I think that's what he's done here, both in free agency and in round 1, and I'm super curious to see what he does in round 2 to supplement this pick and continue to fill holes. So let's keep talking about TJ Hockenson. Let's give you some stats here. TJ Hockenson led the entire draft class with an 89.5 overall Pro Football Focus grade. I know some of you out there hear that and you're like, Pro Football Focus, they don't know what they're talking about, or, you can't just go by that. Well, what Pro Football Focus does do is they grade every game, every play, every player. So, regardless if you totally believe in their grading scales, they're watching everything this guy does on every play, putting a number to it. So, 89.5 overall out of 100, you gotta love that. TJ Hockenson has the lowest drop rate of any tight end in college football. And you want to know what that drop rate is? 2%. I want to say if you go back and look at it, I even hate to bring up his name multiple times. Eric Ebron's drop rate was always in college, I want to say it was around the 8 percentile range, if not higher. In the pros, it did not dip, it was in that same range, and we didn't even feature him. Imagine if we featured the ball to him, how many times he dropped the football. TJ Hockenson catches it when it's there. The Lions have been putting a big emphasis on that the last few years. They went out and they got Marvin Jones, who's consistently caught the football here with the team. They've went ahead and added Kenny Galladay. Kenny Galladay has sticky hands. If it's in the range, he catches the ball. What was our big issue before we started bringing in guys like that? Oh yeah, they're talented, but man, they got focus drops. Oh man, he got open, but then dropped the ball, would have been an easy touchdown. That's not happening anymore, and this is just another way to add to that if this guy's open and Stafford gets in the ball, it's going to be caught, and he's going to turn upfield and do some damage. Now let's speak of doing damage, man. This guy had 744 yards last season with the Hawkeyes in an offense that was splitting with double tights all year long. 357 of those yards were yak yards. So over like 48-50% of this guy's yardage was after he caught the football. So he's not a catch it and go down guy. This guy isn't just a barely a chain mover. He catches it and he gets going. And like I said, he'll run you over. He'll hurdle you, as we saw in the highlights. He'll put the ball in the paint by going for the pylon and trying to score a touchdown. I think there's a lot to be said about this guy in regards to yak yards. And that's something we lost with Golden Tate. I feel like we sort of added it back by adding TJ Hockenson. Now, one thing I just said about not just moving the chains, but let's talk about that for a minute. TJ Hockenson, when it comes to moving chains, no tight end picked up more chain-moving receptions on third down last season than TJ Hockenson. You want to know how many times he moved the chains for the Hawkeyes? 50 times. That's 50. 50 times he moved the chains. So Bob Quinn said when the chips were down, when they needed to score touchdowns, when it was third and medium, not only guess who was in the ball game, but who they throw the football to? TJ Hockenson. So just off the top here, giving you stats. I mean, he led the draft class with his grade. He has the lowest drop rating. He had the most chain moves. And he had one of the highest yak yard percentages based on his catches. I mean, that's crazy. His receiving grade was 90.8. His run grade, which again everybody wants to compliment him on, was at 74.1. But I mean, go ahead and look at these pass catching split out tight ends. Go check their run grades and see what it is in comparison. I mean, it's not good. So that just shows he can do both things. He's a multifaceted guy. So, you know, there's some numbers for you. I mean, before I jumped on this podcast, I was talking to my buddy Chops, and Chops went Grifka 2.0 on me, man. He was like, I don't value tight ends in the top 10. And I said, Chops, it's not about the position, man. It's about the player. I said, it's about the player, the fit, the need, the skill set, and the current team. Like, what kind of team are we building? If we were the Chiefs, you know, who were adding lots of receivers, big quarterback, you know, you would add more of that flex tight end, that Noah Fant type. But the way our team is going, we're going in a different direction, so he fits. And so, I hate to call you out, Chops, but I got to, man. You threw back at me, well, why wouldn't you take a kicker then? If it's about the player and not the position, you know, wouldn't that have value? And I was like, well, no, because, you know, again, a kicker isn't a need for us. It doesn't fit. Everybody with a brain knows you don't take a kicker anywhere, basically, in the draft, you know, and except very late when you need one. And that just doesn't hold water because so many, I mean, it's not like I just said, hey, it's not about position at all. Position of need is important. Position value is important. But I don't care what the position value or the pick number is. If you're taking a guy that doesn't fit your team, isn't a good football player, doesn't have the skill set you're looking for. And TJ Hockenson, almost anybody you ask will say, man, he's a good player. Or, you know, I think he would fit what the Lions are looking for. So basically saying he'd check all the boxes, but I'd pass on him for this. Why? Most people will just say, well, he's a tight end. Well, tight ends have never produced at that high a level, so you can't take them that high. You know, and my counterpoint is like when I'm looking at my board, I was pulling Lions targets off, and yeah, on my board, staring me in the face was Ed Oliver, and that would have been my selection. Now, I don't love his fit either because of where he played in college. It was hard to say if he really fit what the Lions are doing. The Lions already had a few DTs, so the fit and need wasn't as big there, but to me, he was the top guy on my board, and he was the most talented and the biggest upside. So that's a big determining factor when I pick high. But to just say I don't take tight ends that high, I don't value tight ends that high, is completely ignoring the football player, whether it be TJ Hockenson, Gronkowski, Noah Fant, you know, Travis Kelce, whoever, and you're just assuming, oh, hey, I'll just wait 2 rounds and I'll get one. We'll be fine. You know, everybody knows in this draft, he probably is going to go to Buffalo if you don't take him. He's probably going to go to Green Bay if you don't take him. He might go to Denver at 10 if you don't take TJ. So, you know, that's the way the draft works is, yeah, in a perfect world, you might want to wait a round or 2. But you also might miss out on a player that fits your scheme perfectly, that has all the intangibles, that's just an absolute, you know, solid football player. Again, you don't want to swing and miss in the top 10. You know, you don't want a player either that's low end or a bust by any means or not a high ceiling, but you definitely want to hit, and I think there's not many people you can ask today and say, is TJ Hockenson going to bust? You know, I think you wouldn't get many people to say, oh yeah, he's going to be terrible. Now, how many people would you get that say he's going to be a Pro Bowler multiple years? You know, he's going to put up these big stats. You know, I don't know how many people are going to vouch for him that way either. You know, it's probably going to be, you know, limited. But what I think you will see is a lot of people saying, he fits the team. Think he'll be pretty good. I hope he helps us win. And I wish we could have traded down and got him. Oh, I wish we could have waited and got him. but that wasn't the case. They didn't think they could. They didn't want to take that risk. So they took the player that they pretty much know is a safe bet. Got some good upside. Can do both things on both sides of the football. So I think, that's really important. Again, outwardly admitting that if I'm Bob Quinn, I wouldn't have made the pick. I didn't get to interview TJ Hockenson or Ed Oliver, but to me, I would have went with Oliver just based on upside and dynamic ability to get after the quarterback and really make this defense something crazy. So, I've given you a ton of reasons about TJ Hockenson. I've given you some stats. I've given you some things about him. The more and more I think about it, the more and more I digested this thing. This guy fits the 2019 Detroit Lions perfectly. If we're being real about it, yeah, we wish we could have took this guy in the middle to the late first round, but that wasn't the case. So they took him at 8. Now he's got to produce on the field. Grifka was all caught up in stats. To me, a good year, if I had to put numbers on it for TJ Hockenson, is probably around, 500 yards to 750. I want him to score at least 5. Give me 8 to 10 touchdowns on a high end. Block you, Nick Bawden, Kerryon Johnson, that offensive line. I want you to maul people so we can run the football consistently from weeks 1 to week 16, 17, and in the playoffs. And if you can do that and you can help us win ball games, mesh well with the team, help Matt Stafford get off the schneid he's been on a little bit, I'm good with it, man. I really am good with it. I like this pick. I graded it on our Google sheet as a B-, and the reason I did that is because I probably would have been more in the C category. But when you look at it, when you say, hey, it's a perfect fit, it fits a need. The scheme, is not a Jim Bob Cooter scheme. It's this new regime that I think values this type of player. These players don't grow on trees. So I bumped it up to a B- because of all the boxes they did check, and the only one they didn't is that people think based on 50 years of data, you can't take this quote-unquote type of player at this pick. Well, hey, he goes out and balls out, helps you on both sides of the game, run, pass, great guy in the locker room, a real blue-collar Detroit-type football player that we haven't had in a long time. I think you're going to totally bump all that old data and say, man, I'm so glad that Hockamania is running wild because, I think this could be special and could be a pick we look back years ago and say, man, a lot of people were down on it. A lot of people had all these reasons. All he's done is come in and put his head down, play football, and do exactly what a multifaceted tight end in the new NFL needs to do. So that's my big take on TJ Hockenson. Without getting into a ton of names here in round 2, I'll just say this to kind of end us out. There are so many good football players on the board. I'm looking at my team needs: edge, interior lineman, linebacker, corner, receiver, and possibly a safety. Those are easily obtainable in the next 8 type picks. And one thing Bob Quinn does too is he takes not only value, but Matt Pat might have a few aces up his sleeve where he wants to get a versatile safety. So he can be crazy multiple on defense. He can blitz, he can cover, he can do all this stuff. If they took one in the second round, that might shock some people, but I think that he might see that as the new age NFL type defense. I don't know that I would spend a huge high resource on receiver because I feel like, a Godwin later in the rounds could kind of do what we need, which is sort of, you need a guy to compete with Powell behind Amendola, but you go out and spend a high second rounder on a smaller slot type receiver. I feel like you could probably better use those resources. Right now I'm kind of looking at interior linemen and also as an edge there. Do they value a type like a Chase Winovich on edge? What kind of edge are they looking for? As well as what kind of interior lineman? Juwan Taylor continues to fall, like, is he a guy that can either play right tackle and can Wagner slide in, or could Juwan Taylor play right guard? I mean, the value just seems too crazy to pass up. You know, you got a big old 340-pounder in Samia there from Oklahoma. Does he fit what they're looking for? I don't know. And then you got the corners. You know, Murphy, Greedy, Rocky Sin, Justin Lane, Julian Love, Mullins. You know, all these guys. I feel like that's one I'd roll the dice and probably wait till the third round if there's still a lot on the board when you pick, because let's say you come up to pick and there's 5 or 6 of those guys are still out there. I'd probably go in a different direction, hoping that one of those 6, 2 of those guys are staring me in the face in the third round. That's kind of how you play the board as far as not only who's out there, but how many and how close are they graded. Because if they're all pretty close, let it slide by and try to get it around later. You know, there's nothing better than in a fantasy football draft wanting to take a guy and then saying, man, I'm going to wait another round. And sure enough, he ends up being there. You get the same player around later. I mean, that's tremendous when that happens. So, tons of good football players for the Lions without getting into all the names. Those are kind of the positions, things I'd be looking for. And curious later, I mean, if they can add an impactful linebacker, whether it be a rush-type guy or another guy to play alongside Jared Davis, or how about a backup for Jared Davis, you know? I mean, I don't feel there's much behind him in the middle. We need some depth there as well. So, looking forward to it. Again, most important day of the draft here, rounds 2 and 3. There's my deep dive on TJ Hockenson. You know, pumped him up quite a bit. You know, I know last night we were kind of getting after each other, me and Grifka arguing, Hughes in there being the referee, but, you know, I thought it was warranted. I think Grifka's negativity of just tight end's terrible. His stats will never be good enough. Like, we want to win Super Bowls, we want to win playoff games, and most people say, well, yeah, you don't win those with tight ends, and they're right. But you win that with really good football teams that are really, you know, solid overall. You know, the Patriots this past year, they don't have a bunch of superstars, but they have a really good fundamental team across the board that can beat you on most Sundays, and an incredible quarterback. So, you know, Matt Stafford stepped his game up, put a good, solid team, you know, offense, defense, special teams around him. You know, that's how we're going to win and win big. So I think, you know, all this Grifka and all these people out there that are just looking at it at surface level, we dove into all the different layers, all the different reasons why this guy makes sense, why this guy can really help this team, and why it's not just as simple as, oh, it's a tight end at 8, I hate it. Oh, it's a, you know, TJ Hockenson, he can't be that good of an athlete. He's not going to put up these big stats. That's not what it's about. It's much deeper than that. That's our deep dive. Looking forward to round 2. Me and the fellas will be back after rounds 2 and 3, recapping, giving you all our thoughts. And I'm thinking after today, we're going to look at 3 picks. Hockenson and these 2 other guys that we'll probably get if we don't trade down and move around. That you're going to look at that 3, and everybody's going to be much happier than they are today because they'll see the big picture. They'll see that they added 2 more really good football players, probably at positions of need. Be ready to rock and roll heading into the later rounds, heading into 2019. So drink it in, Detroit Koolaid, call that listener line, pour it out, drink it in, tell me what you're thinking. We love hearing from everybody, so it should be another great day. The draft, the greatest event in sports. Can't wait for it. Thank you so much for listening. TJ Hockenson, welcome to the D. We can't wait to see you doing work on the field, and can't wait to see who Bob Quinn and Matt Pat add in these later rounds. Take care, everybody. Detroit Koolaid, we're out.
Pack the bag, start the plane. This game is over. It is over. What a comeback by the Lions. Drink it in, man.